Caribbean all-inclusive resorts aren't as cheap as they were just a few years ago, especially in the most popular destinations. But the increases haven't been equal everywhere. If you look just a little beyond the most famous resort areas, there are still nearby alternatives that offer great resorts, solid food, and much better value. In this video, I'll show you where all-inclusive is still a good deal in the Caribbean based on current prices and real examples, including a couple of smaller islands near the end that might surprise you. I'm Roger from priceoftravel.com. Let's get started. Let's start with the Cancun region because this is where all-inclusive pricing varies the most depending on exactly where you stay. The Cancun hotel zone has a huge concentration of all-inclusive resorts, and the main draw here is really the beach itself. This is one of the nicest stretches of beach in the Caribbean, and most of the resorts are set up around that. Beautiful water, easy swimming, and a very polished resort-focused experience. What you don't usually get in the hotel zone is a massive list of included activities. Compared to places like the Dominican Republic, these resorts tend to be more about the location and the beach than about non-stop entertainment. In terms of pricing, there are usually one or two entry-level all-inclusive resorts that come in at relatively reasonable rates, and one example right now is the Occidental Costa Cancun, which is around $270 per night. It's a decent value for the location, but it's also usually the cheapest option in the zone. Beyond that, prices in the hotel zone climb quickly, and most of the better-known resorts now start at around $350 per night and go up from there. Cancun is still a fun and very easy place to stay, especially if you want great beaches and a straightforward resort experience. But from a value perspective, there are often better all-inclusive deals just a little farther away. Just south of Cancun, Playa del Carmen offers a very different kind of all-inclusive experience, and it's often where you'll find better value if the hotel zone feels too resort-focused. The beaches here generally aren't as nice as what you get in Cancun, but Playa del Carmen makes up for that by actually feeling like a real town. There are all-inclusive resorts right in the center of town and near Fifth Avenue, so you can walk out of your resort and be surrounded by restaurants, shops, and local life. That makes Playa del Carmen a great choice for travelers who want the convenience of an all-inclusive resort, but also want to feel like they're visiting another country, not just staying inside a resort bubble. If the beach isn't your top priority, this can be a really appealing option. And then there's Cozumel, which is just a short ferry ride away and is known much more for diving and snorkeling than for nightlife or shopping. Cozumel has a calmer, more laid-back feel, and it tends to attract more active travelers who want to spend their days in the water rather than by the pool. For the dates I researched, Cozumel actually had the best all-inclusive pricing in the whole region. One example is the Cozumel Hotel and Resort, where all-inclusive rates were around $236 per night, which is excellent value for an island that offers such good diving and snorkeling. So if you're open to staying just outside the Cancun hotel zone, Playa del Carmen and Cozumel are both places where all-inclusive still makes a lot of sense, depending on whether you care more about nightlife and culture or underwater activities. A completely different all-inclusive option in the same region is the area now known as the Riviera Maya, which stretches mostly south of Playa del Carmen. This is where you'll find huge beachfront resorts that feel almost like theme parks. These places are designed around scale with long lists of included activities, nightly entertainment, and enough restaurants that you could stay a full week without repeating the same one twice. Similar to Punta Cana, which we'll talk about next, many Riviera Maya resorts are built as large complexes made up of multiple hotels. You might have one adults-only section, another designed for families with water parks, a higher-end luxury section, and a more budget-oriented option, and guests can usually use the facilities across the entire complex. If that kind of resort experience sounds appealing to you, the Riviera Maya offers very good value right now. One example is the Bahia Principe Grand Coba, which is part of a 4-hotel complex with more than 3,000 total rooms and over 20 restaurants. At around $311 per night all-inclusive, you're getting an enormous amount for your money along with wide beaches and non-stop activities. This isn't the place to go if you want something small or quiet, but if you like having everything included and lots to do, the Riviera Maya is one of the best value areas in the Caribbean at the moment. Before we move on to the Dominican Republic, I should also mention Cuba because I know I'll hear about it in the comments if I don't. If you're not traveling from the United States, Varadero in Cuba is still one of the cheapest places in the Caribbean for all-inclusive beach resorts, often with prices well below what you'll find in Mexico or the Dominican Republic. The beaches there are excellent and many Canadians and Europeans go back year after year. For US travelers, Cuba isn't an option for standard tourism, which is why I don't include it in most of these comparisons. But if you're coming from elsewhere, it's definitely worth a look for pure beach value. Next up is the Dominican Republic, where all-inclusive resorts are basically the entire travel economy. Punta Cana, on the southeastern tip of the island, is famous for its long beaches and massive resort complexes, most of them run by Spanish hotel chains that are very good at this style of resort. You get wide beaches, large and well-designed properties, and very efficient operations with dozens of resorts offering non-stop activities, big pools, and nightly entertainment. It's a very easy and reliable all-inclusive destination. That said, prices in the main Bávaro beach area have crept up recently. One of the more affordable options right now is the Catalonia Punta Cana at around $334 per night, which is a solid choice. But for similar quality and often better value, it's usually worth looking just a bit outside the main Punta Cana zone, which brings us to La Romana. Over the last year or so, I've noticed a clear pattern when searching for all-inclusive deals in Punta Cana. The more affordable resorts are often about an hour away, and many of them are clustered around the south coast town of La Romana. What's interesting is that many of these resorts are run by the same hotel chains you see in Punta Cana, so the overall quality is just as high. In some ways, La Romana actually has a few advantages. The resorts here tend to be much smaller than the mega resorts in Punta Cana, which makes them feel calmer and more relaxed. And a handful of them are located on west-facing beaches, so you get beautiful sunsets every evening, something you don't really get on the East Coast. You still have most of the same all-inclusive features like multiple pools, several restaurants, and organized activities, just on a more manageable scale. One good example is the HM Alma de Bahia, an adults-only all-inclusive resort with fewer than 300 rooms and rates around $222 per night. So if you're okay with about a 1-hour shuttle ride from the airport instead of a 20 or 30 minute drive, La Romana is one of the easiest ways to save around $100 per night while staying in a smaller, more relaxed resort. A high-quality all-inclusive resort for around $222 a night in high season is already a great deal, but if even that is outside of your budget, there is a cheaper option in the Dominican Republic. The north coast town of Puerto Plata is sort of an old-school version of Punta Cana. The all-inclusive resorts here tend to be smaller, a bit older, and noticeably cheaper. One thing I always notice when researching Puerto Plata is that review scores for all-inclusive resorts here are generally lower than what you see in Punta Cana or La Romana, so it's important to keep expectations in line. This isn't the same level of polish or consistency. That said, there are still deals that can make sense for the right traveler. One example is Playa Bachata, where all-inclusive rates can be around $164 per night in high season, and sometimes even less. If your realistic options are either a very affordable all-inclusive vacation or staying home, Puerto Plata can be worth considering, as long as you go in knowing that you're trading some refinement for a much lower price. Before we move on to the smaller islands, I should also mention Jamaica because it's traditionally one of the most popular all-inclusive destinations in the Caribbean. Jamaica still has plenty of good resorts, but when I checked current prices, the better reviewed all-inclusive options were generally starting a bit over $400 per night. At that price point, you can often get a newer or better rated resort in places like the Dominican Republic, Mexico, or even some of the smaller islands we're about to look at. Jamaica hasn't gotten worse, it's just become less competitive on price compared to nearby alternatives. If an all-inclusive vacation sounds appealing, but the massive resorts we've talked about so far feel a bit overwhelming, there are also a couple of smaller Caribbean islands with surprisingly good all-inclusive value. St. Lucia is widely considered one of the most beautiful islands in the Caribbean, and it also has around 24 all-inclusive resorts. While some of the best-known options like Sandals can get very expensive, many of the other resorts are much smaller and more reasonably priced. One good example is the Coco Palm, where all-inclusive rates are around $368 per night. It's a small resort with fewer than 90 rooms, an excellent 8.6 review average, and a much more relaxed feel than the mega resorts in Mexico or the Dominican Republic. Antigua is another small island worth mentioning. Most all-inclusive resorts there start at around $500 per night or more, but there is one budget-friendly option that stands out. The Jolly Beach Antigua offers all-inclusive rates starting at around $288 per night in high season. It's a larger resort with about 400 rooms and solid reviews, and it can be a good choice if you want a smaller island experience without paying luxury prices. The main takeaway here is that all-inclusive resorts can still be a good deal in the Caribbean, but where you go matters more than ever. Prices are highest in the most famous areas, but if you're flexible and willing to look just a little beyond them, there's still excellent value to be found. I've also put together a full article version of this video on priceoftravel.com with the same destinations, current prices, and links to each resort, so you can explore everything at your own pace. I'll link that below. And if you want even more options, I also have another video called 11 Cheapest Caribbean Islands for All-Inclusive Resorts, which goes into more detail and covers a few additional places. If you found this helpful, please give the video a like. It really helps the channel, and consider subscribing for more Caribbean and budget travel guides like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.